It's a really significant thing. And it was like a pink brick, and it had two spray painted like decals on there of red, white, and blue of two different kinds of flags. And so I dreamed about it like 4 months before I ever saw it. And I went to go visit a friend of mine, and I was walking through the desert, like out in the middle of nowhere, and there it is by a bush. Like, shouldn't even be there. Like, has no rhyme or reason. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll pick this up. Well, I put it in my car. I hung out with it for about 6 months until all the downloads were down. And so what it is, it's a program. They leave these programs here and there. And I pick them up, and I take them with me, and when I'm done, I put them somewhere else. You know, I release them and put them somewhere else. So the first time that they actually ever came to me since I was a little girl and actually talked to me was in 2014. And I got in my car, and I was headed towards, not Coeur d'Alene, the one up higher, which is, well, think
Pocatello?
about it. And I was going to do 10 days of ceremony with my teacher, Bobido. Because that area had a lot of white supremacy. It had, had the Aryan Nation compound there, a Ku Klux Klan compound there, Sandpoint, Idaho. And so it had a lot of really bad stuff. So I went up there to help him, to help clear all that area, and there were other people up there that were there. So it was like 10 days of heavy ceremonial work. So I was headed up there, and I was going through this area in California where it was really, really like, twisty and turny through these canyons. And it was a song that was the download. It was a really weird song. And after it got done playing, I thought, well, that's a pretty weird song. And I didn't think anything of it. And then that radio station went dead, and I couldn't get anything. And so I kept searching for a station, and then I found another one. And what song comes on is that same exact song. And I thought, wow, that's pretty weird. And then boom, I was gone.
Yeah.
And so my body is like still driving the car. And they pulled me up into a holographic, program that they've left me, that I would interact with them. And there was probably around 200 different extraterrestrials that were there. There was this huge oval area with these seats in it. I couldn't see anybody else, but I knew and sensed. And then there was this light coming from the woman that was sitting in front of me. And then all of a sudden, I had like 6 or 7 streams of information that came through. And see, one of the things I was fighting with is ever since the brain cancer, I felt like I had lost my magic. I'd lost I lost something. And so I was blaming myself that I must have fallen from grace. Like I must have done something that I was void of my relationship with God or the Creator. I was void with my relationship with these beings, all these things, and I was void with a relationship with myself, and I felt completely lost. So during this activation, she said to me, telepathically, this is how the conversation starts, is we don't want you to believe that you have fallen from grace. That's not what's happened. You have done nothing wrong. We had to slow you down. So then there's information that's coming from before this world that I came here, information coming in from my life, past, present, future, all this information coming in as one solid picture. And what they showed me is that they picked me to come here because I was strong, and that they had to keep me alive. And they showed me as this, big Clydesdale horse at the front of a line of Clydesdales, and there was 3 or 4 on one side, 3 or 4 behind me on the other side, and there was a huge wagon. And they said, every time you get an inch, even if we loaded that wagon and we had those other horses working against you, you would manage to figure out how to pull it forward. And so we had to kind of apply head injuries, and the last one we applied onto was the brain cancer, because we needed you to halt, and you just have so much strength that you would just keep going no matter what was going on, and we needed to keep you safe. So I went through this really big healing, and then I went through a really big period the last few years. Well, let's see, where are we at? 2018. And I'm starting to want to work with my family again, but I was really mad at them for a while because I realized, like, you're the ones that are supposed to love me the most. And you're the ones that hurt me the most. More than any, I mean, the hurt on this planet is terrible, but you hurt me more than that. So how could I ever trust you again? Like, how could I trust you? You know, how can I rely on you and trust on you? So it's taken me like about 4 years to actually work through that anger, you know, and get myself back to my own personal balance, which means I'm not relying on them. I'm not relying on the outside world. I'm not relying on anything. I'm relying on me and my position in the wheel and the medicine that I'm working and making sure that I'm physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, you know, together and aligned in a unified field. So I do what's good for me when I need to do that, which is all the time. So I don't engage with a lot of things anymore that are going to pull me off the center of my wheel. So when I talk to people, and a lot of people get into like this really new age stuff, the new age stuff is like a lot of it's propaganda. It's not even true. You know, it's a scam. It's no different than what was put out about the Bible, and we know now that that's a complete 100% scam that was created in Rome, and it was manufactured to control mass populations. So the same thing with the whole ascension thing is another kind of propaganda, because in Christianity they call it the rapture, ascension. In New Age they call it the ascension, and then in some of the ancient people and texts, it's called the harvest, the great harvest, which is where, you know, the extraterrestrials take the people away to create new biological material to create beings, and then they also harvest your soul or spirit because they harvested it before, so they control it. So we have to be really careful about what's really going on this planet and make sure that we're in the center of our wheel and we're not stepping outside of that and accepting information that may not be true, and then we're part of the activation of that.
Yeah.
So we have to know without a shadow of a doubt, because we can bring that harvesting about. You know, we can bring it where mass people are being removed off the planet and then taking as slave to other planets or food sources, and it's a really hard thing for people to wrap their heads around, but it's pretty serious. And the reason why we're not getting a lot of help is the really, really highly evolved beings like my star family. It has to be based on free will. So that means you have to take the physical expression and do the physical work in order to bring around a different future. This is what has to happen, you know, because we're physical beings in a biological suit in a 3D world. So we have to use mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual to actually create a new reality. We can't just like bury our heads in the sand and be like, you know, the ascension's coming, the event's coming, and it's like, no, the event is you. Even in the Bible, there's like this one part that all these priests poo-poo. I had to read the Bible thoroughly. And it says, it's supposed to be Jesus' words in red, and it says something like, continue to work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. And when I was a kid and I read that, I was like, no one's coming to save you. You have to save you. It's an individual, you know, thing. Okay, can you have somebody else talk? I got to run real quick, and I'll be right back.
Okay, no problem. This is the New Way show, and she just talked about the New Way. And talking about how it takes free will to choose a new reality, and then creating the new reality is 100% on to everything we've been talking about. And so right now there's 22 minutes left in the show, and I think I might have talked for about 5 of them. But what's going on is that the 4 fields that she talked about, spiritual, emotional, physical, and mental fields, are balanced with 3 fields, electricity, magnetism, and I called it spirituality, but it's a different spiritual field than the one she talked about. And then the eighth field is the ether, the void. And so I can now take the tree and superimpose what we've talked about and just gotten from Bridgette's conversation, and I think I can run with it as a unified field theory. Now, unified field theory is what Einstein was working on. Suppose my cat has anything to do with this? So anyway, the theory that cats control the world and that people are just items that the cats are controlling fits in the same vein as the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where the white mice were controlling the world. And it really seems to me that as a crypto fiction writer, we have to look into the past and see how the past creates the future, because the fiction of the past is today's reality. And so what we're watching is what I would call a Tom Clancy world. And they had to off Tom Clancy about 6 years ago, or sometime after the Bushes during the Obama administration. They offed Tom Clancy because he was telling people how it really worked behind the scenes, because he was creating the reality that now is hiding with all this chicken shit in Washington, D.C. And the only way to get rid of it is to not pay any attention to it at all, except to refer to it as another piece of fiction that has been thrown at us. So as we create a new media, what we're basically trying to do is give everybody an individual voice and make it so the playing field is you start as one human. As one human, you do what you can and save yourself and bring on that salvation. And then immediately afterwards, you go and you figure out what scale you want to work on. And that scale can be micro, it can be macro, it could be humanities. It doesn't matter what field you want to work on, but if you're working in a field, you can't go mucking with other fields. So if you're in the macro and you get invited to something in the micro, you shut up and appreciate it and learn from it, but you don't bring it back into the macro, because the macro isn't ready to deal with the problems the micro is solving, and the micro isn't going to deal with problems that the macro is solving, and our problems are really on human scale. So if we can't deal with the sciences, because sciences cut humans apart and go only smaller, we can deal with a few of the sciences, like the Hermetic ones, astrology, alchemy, and figure out how to do things without using the system as it's been taught in any way. In that way, we take satyagraha from the system, but we do use the system to do what we need to do to earn a living and to make it go and to get people to wake up, but they have to wake themselves up, and we can teach them what they need to know if they ask. But for people who are not seeking to learn, no amount of teaching is going to help them. And for people who are teaching, if they're not learning, they're lost. Okay.
Yeah. So one thing that I came across was, so before we get out of here, there's a couple of things. 7 generations. I want to briefly talk about the compost as alchemy, and the do no harm principle. So this is the deal, is I had to come to the conclusion that I was doing harm. So anybody that I would try to impose my realm on, my medicine wheel on, or wherever I would locate, and I'm, trying to enforce different belief systems or get in someone's head or their heart, I'm doing harm to them, because if they're not in the space, that they're ready for that kind of, upgrade or change or whatever that you're going to talk about it, you're doing harm to them. In a lot of cases, they'll revolt against you, but you created it because you harm them psychologically, right? Because of trying to manipulate, control them, or get them to understand or whatever else. So we deserve the punishment that comes along with that. So we have to be really careful about staying in our wheel and emanating the energy out to the world versus trying to teach, manipulate, control them, or get them to understand. So it's more about emanating, and that they see your life and they move towards you because there are things about your life that they want to have. Then you can actually help them and lead them. So alchemy can be as simple as I was on a farm, I don't remember when, 2010 or something like that, maybe 2009, and so I've been going to permaculture stays, blah, blah this, blah, blah that, and I was looking for the right and perfect agricultural fit, because I wanted to start making my own plant medicines so that I could give my clients in practice, medicines for respiratory cancer, just different things, plant medicines. So, but I had to go back to farming to learn how to grow the medicine. So I ended up on this farm where it was only a 15% biodynamic farm, and it was only because this, crazy forest guy, and I have to tell you, this guy was so out of his mind in a not very good way, kind of dangerous. So I was kind of stuck on a farm with him, and he made the compost. But the one thing that I did learn is that he made this compost as a master biodynamic compost maker that was so unbelievably off the charts that when I held it in my hand, it was black. It was like black coffee with humus. It was really swishy, like marshmallows. And it radiated this energy. And the thing that shocked me the most about it was digging through it was it had gold specks in it. And I said, do you guys put gold in this? And he said, no, it develops on its own through the process. So I'm not fully there yet. I'm getting close to being a master of biodynamic compost. But just the act of composting and pulling a lot of things that you're just going to find around you in your environment and making these composts, you can actually, make gold fleck. You can pull anything into these composts by utilizing the materials in your environment and seeing what comes up. And then you're creating a massive alchemical process. And then you apply that, you feed it to the animals, it can cure their diseases, it can give them longevity. I mean, because you're dealing with things at a chemistry, like a deep, sacred, chemistry level. And it's so easy to do that everybody can do this. So alchemy is not that far out there, and it can be an actual land principle. It can be a physical principle to actually fix the earth, fix our health. Because if the soil is bad and it's sterile, then the biological suit is sterile. It means it has no microbes in it, and it starts to degenerate and die. So, whatever is going on with your soil and your environment is also part of that medicine wheel and where you're at. It's part of that, if you want to call it the south part of the wheel, it's in your physical wheel. So, if you're not having a relationship with, say, the south side of your wheel, which is the earth, the planet, your physical life, your childhood, a lot of these things, then you're missing out on a huge amount of information and also health in that part, in that sector. So I learned that composting, especially biodynamically, can actually do unbelievable things as far as a physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual fixes and cleans, and also to help unify you with the planet, right? Because if you're unified with the microbes in the soil because you've fixed the microbes in the soil because it was depleted, then now you're working in a unified field with the earth, right? You've created in your own little sector. So something to think about. That, alchemy can be super basic, bottom line, period of the story. Okay, so the last thing that I want to add in here is something I just learned. Okay, so I've been working with the generations principle for a long time. I worked with the Lakota Sioux medicine woman who, would talk to me a lot about energies and different things that are kind of held in the system that we put into our system based on the development that we learn. So we can have, 7 generations past on our mother's side. It runs in our gut. And 7 generations on our father's side in our gut, right? So not only is your intuition in your gut, sometimes the gut reaction is derogatory because it's based on somebody else's belief systems in your family line that you're still holding the genetics. So part of healing is, being in the center of your wheel and noticing these things as they come up and where are they coming from, who do they belong to, how can I clear that so that I'm not carrying those 7 generations in my gut and that I'm reacting to the outside world based on these people who may not even still be alive, who I never even knew, belief systems that are still embedded with me because they weren't cleaned out. And so the sins of our fathers, right, comes into me and I have to deal with them, right? There's a lot of vocabulary with dealing with that. So there's also like playing it forward 7 generations. When I clear the 7 generations of the past, the energetic, DNA, RNA stuff, then it clears the road for the 7 generations ahead of me. So that's on an energetic level. But there's also the principle in the native path where a lot of my teachers teach me about the 7 generations, that we are responsible for the 7 generations that will come. And we will be liable if the 7 generations don't come in a healthy way. That will be our burden because we're at the point where it's our responsibility to make sure. Well, the component, so we need to, fix this earth for the 7 generations to come. A lot of these people in New Age want to ascend and want to leave. It's like, but we're responsible for this mess, right? We're individually responsible for this mess. So I just learned this recently that just blew my mind because I was talking to this Native woman the other day, and I had no idea because nobody's ever talked to me in time, and a time factor with the 7 generations. And so she said, well, that each generation is considered 500 years on the native road. And I was like, so 7 generations forward would be 3,500 years, right? That we are, our responsibility to see forward in 3,500 years, whether it's like we've got to fix the soil, we've got to fix the food, we've got to become sovereign, the medicine systems have to change, all these things have to change because right now there is no 3,500 years in front of us. I mean, we're lucky to have 8 in front of us right now. I mean, because the whole, Earth is collapsing. So this kind of like changes a lot of, I had to sit with it for a few days. And then I was like, so back in those days where this was established, forward to 3,500 years, these principles come way before Egypt. They come way before, any of this stuff. They go back to the indigenous people who came here to this planet before it went haywire. And then a lot of the white people, the white races were created basically in petri dishes as slaves, because they couldn't get the indigenous people to be slaves. So this goes way, way, way back to the original computer hard drive designs of the planet, right? These are the teachings and the information that are contained in there. And, as humans on the planet, we're so minute to minute, like everything deters our attention that there is no holding your attention. There is no intention. You can't hold your intention for a very long period of time. I find gardening or helping in community gardens to actually be really beneficial in holding attention for long durations of time. But we're so like minute to minute that we can't really hold these attentions where, people would have lived for 500 years. So you would have had one generation 500 years, right? A lot of spiritual texts talk about this kind of stuff before, they contaminated the DNA of the humans on the planet. They lived for a long, long periods of time. So 500 years would have been the lifespan, say, of one generation or one person. So that's where, like you would get, a generation being 500 years, having to see 7 generations in the future, what you're doing right now, what's creating that, and how it's going to be created in this moment, and being able to wrap your head around, like, you are responsible for everything that you do, that's going to, create a good way, a good road, a good path for all of, the things that we're responsible to come forward in the future. So 3,500 years, it was like, I thought in like 7 generational terms. I'm like, oh yeah, well that's like, maybe like, what is I think recently came out that, people's life, people are in the United States are only living to about 65. CEOs, 60. So, a generation would be like maybe 70 years, right? But they're talking about, no, the generation was 500 years. So 3,500 years is like, wow, that's quite significant. So what am I doing in my, in the center of my wheel that is making things happen so that, maybe I can at least think one generation, which would be 500 years in the future. So, it gets kind of like, you start thinking about this stuff, and we have to really get out of the short-term thinking, I think, which enables us into really unifying ourselves for a long-term, a unified field within ourselves in order to emanate this kind of stuff out into reality as a code. A code that is just the frequency of our code is playing out into it. Into the environment, because it's going to be way too difficult for us to run around and try to teach everyone all these different things. I think it's better to become like a unified field, really work on that, get your left and right hemispheres working together, and then it all flows out from you. Then at that point, once you become a stable, unified being in your own unified field, it all flows out into the systems like a code, right?
Yeah.
You call it light, you could call it a code, you could call it, whatever frequency or whatever else. But I think that's where we have to get in order for it all to kind of flow out effortlessly, and that these codes and energies lay all over the place wherever we go. That way people walk through them and they can pick them up if they want to or they don't want to. It doesn't matter. But then it's way less work than trying to deal with people on an individual basis.
Last 5 minutes of the show is now upon us. And so I wanted to let everybody who's in the listening audience know that this conversation will continue into the future, and that we will show up another time, not tomorrow. I have a different guest tomorrow. The unified field and the 0-point energy field are the same concept, and that if the language of each of the different constructs can be merged together, it would be like taking the sociology that I'm working with on a human level and applying the chemistry that I'm working with on a scientific level, and using the scientific mathematical principles of chemistry to define human behavior. So I'm beginning to see permutations of 2 within each of the 8 topics within the wheel, where my brain is running. I just got a charge of activation from the last 2 hours. You could find both Bridgette and me and Intuitive Jacob on Steemit and The All-Seeing You. All of us publish on Steemit. Steemit is a daily blog that we use for support and also for income generation. So the more you comment and talk to other people on Steemit as a social media, the more you can earn money that you can support yourself on. It is an extremely new concept to deal with the blockchain. So tomorrow I will have a guest who can come on and talk intelligently about the blockchain